We begin tonight with President Duterte sharing his thoughts on a proposed code of conduct in the South China Sea and something that he said that now has people scratching their heads. Was the president saying that China should lead and indeed just tell other nations how to behave? We have Bim Santos live in Singapore to help clarify. Bim?
Yes, Robbie, President Rodrigo Duterte did say particular comments about the South China Sea. Duterte made these remarks before the summit of ASEAN-China, where he did point to looking to China in terms of looking for further direction in ironing out the long-sought-for code of conduct in the South China Sea.
In a doorstop interview, Duterte voiced concern about the region being dragged in the ongoing tension between the U.S. and China, noting that the Philippines has a mutual defense treaty with the U.S.
I will focus on the COC. Everything has been excellent between China and the rest of ASEAN, except for the fact that there's a friction between the Western nations and China. And I am worried, I expressed it last night, because we have a defense treaty, mutual defense with the US and
Still, the president says the code of conduct must now be pursued at all costs and that China should help lead the way.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
that is why at all costs we must have the COC.
Okay.
So you're there, you're in possession of, you occupied it. And tell us what route shall we take and what kind of behavior do you like.
During the ASEAN-China summit, Duterte also assumed the role as new country coordinator of ASEAN-China relations, a post the country will hold until 2021. Duterte said during the summit the group is now looking forward to the completion of the first reading of the single draft of the COC negotiating text by next year. China, on the other hand, has issued a statement that it wants the agreement completed in 3 years' time. Duterte said ASEAN and China will continue to maintain a conducive environment for future rounds of negotiations. For now, he says both ASEAN and China will aim to maintain and promote peace and security in the territory.
Bim, that quote attributed to President Duterte where he said, China has occupied the islands, you, I'm referring to China, tell us what route to take, what kind of behavior you like. We can understand people's concern reading those words, but just to explore all angles here, if you just read the quote, there may be two ways to read this. Either he is exasperatedly expressing how he currently sees the status quo, as in, ganyan umasa lang China, or he is suggesting this is the way forward. Hey, China, just tell us what to do, and that's the code of conduct. How do you perceive it? What was the real context here, or is there even any confusion here at all?
Well, you're right, actually, Robbie. There could be a number of ways to read the statements made by the president earlier. Just to lay down the context on which these statements were read, President Duterte actually made these remarks in a doorstop interview before the ASEAN-China summit. These remarks were largely off the cuff. The statement was, the question were phrased in terms of asking the president what were the remarks that what are the statements that he wants to say in the ASEAN-China summit. And then what you said in terms of how to interpret those statements by the president, one way that we could look at it is in terms of amplifying the president amplifying China's role in terms of hammering out, ironing out this long sought-for code of conduct. As we know, this effort has been as long as a long running effort by the ASEAN bloc that has been going on for a number of years. And in terms of direction, this is also something that the president did say in his remarks, in his intervention statement that was issued yesterday, in terms of China getting behind the wheel and steering this COC towards something conclusive. Robbie?
Okay, Bim, let's just reread that quote. And we're asking this and we want to clarify this because this government and this president also has a tendency to have to clarify when things become controversial, and we expect that this quote will really be controversial. But let's just reread it again. This is verbatim what he said. He said, I'd like to tell China And that is why, at all costs, we must have the code of conduct. So you're there, you're in possession, you occupied it, then tell us what route shall we take and what kind of behavior you like. Was it clear that that was a complaint or a statement of fact, or was he laying the basis for the need of a code, for the code of a conduct, or was it a recommendation for China to dictate the terms of the code of conduct?
It could be one or many other things that you actually mentioned. The prior implication or the prior statement that President Duterte said in line with this statement was that China actually has a mutual defense treaty with the U.S. and so, the Philippines has a mutual defense treaty with the U.S. and with the U.S. and China now seemingly locked in a trade in various forms of tension, be it trade or political. He did hint at the Philippines and the region being dragged into this situation. So he said that for this somehow not to be ironed out, he did say that China could help a lot of ways in terms of providing further direction. Now, is that something, is that an implication or an invitation to China to help steer this discussion? That could be one thing. Is this sense of somehow amplifying China's role in this regional bloc in terms of giving further direction or something? That could also be one thing. Well, the thing here is that this statement was largely off the cuff. Was the president, is it a complaint or is it a statement of fact? The president was largely neutral when he said these things and largely extemporaneous. So these are the various considerations that we could take stock in terms of reading this statement uttered by the president earlier today.
Okay, in any case, we do expect Malacanang to try to clarify further, and we expect a lot of people to ask those questions. In the meantime, President Duterte also said he is trying to avert war. Is he pointing to more dire consequences of trade tensions for now between the U.S. and China? And has this affected trade deals or other economic paths?
In terms of trade deals, the thing that's been going on here for quite some time in the ASEAN summit is the continuing dialogue of the RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Participation, which is a regional, China-backed regional trade deal that is being pushed forward. In terms of this South China Sea issue, the long-running efforts to forge a code of conduct affecting other possible trade deals. There seems to be no correlation at the moment, but there seems to be an added sense of urgency right now in terms of advancing RCEP, especially amid the context of rising trade protectionism, as some countries see this trade agreement as a possible buffer against possible fallout from the rising trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Robbie?
Okay, Bim, it was also reported that the president was a no-show in 3 events there at the ongoing ASEAN summit. There's the Singapore working lunch. There's supposed to be a meeting with Australia, South Korea. What happened? Did the president or his spokespersons explain what happened to the president?
Yes, actually, it's the number is now about 5 events, 6 if you count the ongoing gala dinner for ASEAN leaders, which is now currently underway. President Duterte skipped this as well. What we now know is that Communications Secretary Martin Andanar attended in his stead. So actually, a few moments ago, presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo actually issued a statement shedding light on why the president skipped about half of the events today. If I could just read a part of the statement that he issued, he said that the president was actually a no-show simply because he took power naps to catch on sleep. So he said that the president has a punishing schedule coming from yesterday. said that the president slept about just 3 hours and he took periods of rest in between meetings today. And anyway, the meetings that he skipped, most of those were attended by Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin Jr. Robbie?
Okay, Bim Santos reporting live from Singapore for One News.